The Michael Berry Show.
Maryam Henein is the author of Operation George Floyd, a multi-layered psyop exposed. She's also the director of the accompanying documentary, The Real Timeline. And it says, the book that the media, the left, and the right don't want you to read. Operation George Floyd reads like a whodunit deep state thriller while serving as the most comprehensive factual look at George Floyd's 2020 death, which ushered in a color revolution and changed America forever. Very interesting. So we're talking to Maryam Henein. Welcome to the program, ma'am.
Thank you for having me. I have some things to say about the biopic.
But first of all, Maryam, what made you get interested in this project? Why this subject?
That's very interesting. I think that it chose me. I was in the jungle with Google whistleblower Zach Voorhees, and he asked me to choke him. And I was like, what? Like, I'm doing the George Floyd challenge, and I hesitantly stepped on his neck. And then I told him that to find out, we would have to call the medical examiner. I was the first in the country to call the medical examiner, and I was told that it would take weeks and weeks and weeks. And then the day after that, CNN published some preliminary reports on the autopsy and started sowing division. And I scratched my head, and I just never tapped out. This has been a 5-year investigation. I also purchased all the footage from the United States government, and arguably the left and the right have suppressed my work. I am the director behind the award-winning film Vanishing of the Bees. I started my career in the mainstream. I wrote for all the top magazines. My first job from Montreal, Canada was in Los Angeles, working for MSNBC, producing the news for the website. It was just as internet was becoming popularized. And so it's just like a Russian doll of opening one doll and then finding another one in it. There was layer upon layer, and both sides, the left and the right, don't want you to know the truth. Now, as far as his supposed scholarship or working or playing at in Houston, the truth is that they took several different Floyd Georges and they created an amalgamation of a character. And there's in my book is Hush Money, links to the Podesta group, how we went from virus to violence overnight, and we did indeed use this as it was a color revolution to topple statues and rewrite history, recirculate I Can't Breathe in conjunction with us being told to wear face diapers.
I never took the shot. I didn't wear the face diaper. I spoke out against it, and I find how many people will today not admit that. I looked you up as just before we started our discussion, we agree on a lot of things that you have spoken out about the vaccines.
Well, I've been covering vaccines since 2012. I was writing for Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. I'm a functional medicine coach. The technocrats came after me under Operation Quack Pack. So, I first called out Bayer in my film Vanishing of the Bees, got my first death threat. So if you look at my beats, which were medical freedom, vaccines, transhumanism, and George Floyd, as a result, I have lost Venmo, Vimeo, PayPal, GoFundMe, Instacart, Airbnb. I've been smeared on Peacock in a series called Shadowland. The government has shut me down several times. I was debanked by Chase. I am in an alternative dimension, a hero for my courage, I express more balls than most men in this country. So George Floyd taught me a lot, and to even see the conservatives cover up my movie, the real timeline, where I purchased all the footage from the government, and we're looking at what happened between 7:30 and 9:30, and my book looks at everything else. It is for the future, just like it took 50 years. I'm a visionary, so this is to keep record, because we are rewriting the truth.
Maryam,
and
Henein,
I'm about...
hold with me for just a moment.
Yes.
More coming up. The book is Operation George Floyd, a multi-layered psyop exposed, and the documentary is called The Real Timeline.
Mr. Michael Berry. Hey!
Let's drill down into some things about George Floyd. Well, first of all, let's drill down to the timeline of what happened and some things that you think people need to be aware of that they can go to the documentary for later and learn more about.
Absolutely. I would say, one, I want to say that my film is only available on Moonrock Books and MaryamHenein.com, and I'm going to spell it out, Maryam as in Mary, Henein as in Nancy.com, and that one thing that I'm the only one that featured is the role of Cup Foods convenience store in this entire operation, and the truth behind Derek and George Floyd, the fact that they both worked at El Nuevo Rodeo, and that the book looks at money laundering and drug cartels, complicity of the government, and using the destruction to burn evidence, including Precinct 3 and Precinct 4. Precinct 4 was where they had information regarding informants. And to your point of how many people go from Houston to Minneapolis, well, what occurred to me is like, I wonder if it's a drug corridor. And it is. And George Floyd was a truck driver, and that's not really highlighted. But I looked at under every rock. I'm very thorough, and the information there's a reason why I'm on my third publisher, because it's been too dangerous for anyone to stand by. It's certainly not a lack of investigative skills or writing.
Yeah, I think that's an intentionally understated way of making a point, is that so many things have been hidden in this case because there are plenty of facts with regard to the autopsy. There are plenty of facts with regard to a previous arrest that he had that was very similar, that now the video is out on him being hospitalized with an overdose of fentanyl and almost dying, just before all that. I think there are a lot of things. My concern when we have documentarians or book authors on is they don't want to say anything because they think people are going to run to the book or run to the documentary and watch it, and so we end up not being able to talk about much. In my opinion, the more we discuss, the more likely people are to go and read the book and watch the documentary.
Absolutely. I mean, the details, the devil's in the details, and I already have mentioned things that the mainstream on both sides haven't covered. The role of Cup Food. I have Hush Money. They covered up his real children. The George Floyd family trademarked everything under the sun, from slippers to keychains, threatened to sue me for using the public name George Floyd. And, the most telling thing is that Maurice Lester Hall, who was with George, who I befriended, is in jail, and nobody cares about his Black life. Certainly not Benjamin Crump.
Benjamin Crump. Isn't it amazing that this lawyer just keeps popping up every time there's a case and claiming the black person is a victim, even if they plunged a knife into a colleague's chest, or even if they have these long records? I suspect there's a lot more about Ben Crump we don't know. Thoughts?
Well, he's an ambulance chasing shyster. He's a boule. He is a gatekeeper. I have an entire chapter on him, and he's central to orchestrating a lot of these operations, and he certainly has profited from Black people. and parading them as victims. And, you know, my book also reads, it's really showing the blueprint and showing how multi-layered these operations are. And if someone looks at a, you know, Game of Thrones, let's say, series, how detailed and real, quote unquote, that the same level, you know, Hollywood is applied to these operations, and people have been told to believe their eyes, but they left so much on the cutting room floor that you could see in my film. And then it's quite discouraging to see both sides hide the truth. This film, I mean, is an excellent film. It's edited and produced by Sean Hibler. And certainly I've gotten accolades from people like Sue Peters, who is from Minneapolis. And I met someone, I mean, by the grace of God, met someone who's seen George and Derek together. I came across someone else whose footage on Snapchat was literally removed. And they did a good job. I have hundreds of footnotes. And if I was commissioned to write this book today, half of them have been scrubbed even from archive.org. So they do a really good job. And you can imagine that there's repercussions for, I mean, the thousands of hours of work that I've conducted. I mean, the price doesn't do justice. And in the future, if there's only X amount in circulation, this will be a hard-to-find book.
You know, it's interesting what an effort is spent today trying to keep facts. Whether someone agrees or disagrees with what a report says or what a witness said or a timeline that was created by an officer or whatever else, whether you can choose for yourself, but it strikes me as interesting how much effort has been spent suppressing things that might help people come to different conclusions than they have as to, say, what happened to George Floyd.
Absolutely. There's also what ends up is that they bombard the mainstream, and then people get George Floyd fatigue and don't realize that there was a lot going on. There were a lot of legislation that changed. There was a lot of impact and repercussions as a result of this event. There always is. And I call them tries, truth mixed with lies. And so you have, I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but certainly you'll have a influencer talk a lot of truth and then inject a complete lie, and they're not doing the actual investigations. I mean, this is full of freedom of information documents. This is full of images. It comes with receipts, and it lays it out in a very comprehensive, detailed way. And I think that's why it's dangerous. I mean, to get threats from the George Floyd family. And if you think today, we still don't know the details behind Derek Chauvin getting stabbed. Well, the FBI informant gone rogue, John Tursak, a.k.a. Stranger, Mexican cartel leader, only wants to talk to me, the B lady. And 60 Minutes and Fox wanted to get exclusives. And that week of Black Friday of this year, or in November 2024, I order a burger and I get a cockroach in it that same week. I mean, a lot of strange things happen, and they mess with people. You don't have to be a public figure like I am. If you know the truth, or if you stood out against this pandemic, and we're ushering in a transhumanist agenda. Agenda 2030 is very much afoot. And
Maryam,
the answer
I'm
is
going to hold you there because I'm up against a break. The book is Operation George Floyd, a multi-layered psyop exposed, and the documentary to accompany is called The Real Timeline.
The Michael Berry Show.